all counsel. You may continue.
Thank you, Judge. Jodi, before the break, we were talking about an argument that you had with Mr. Alexander before the Havasupai trip, and when he had learned that you went out on a date with John Dixon, right?
Yes.
Okay. The argument you had with him, where did that take place?
I believe it started downstairs over the backpack. That's kind of what started it. And I took the backpack upstairs into his bathroom to look for my toothbrush. Everything had been repacked, so I didn't know what was what. And I just woke up, wanted to brush my teeth before we hit the road. And he came into the bathroom, and the argument escalated in the bathroom.
Okay. This was the argument that Mr. Freeman testified was all about makeup and personal care products, right?
Yes, but it wasn't makeup.
Okay. What sort of things, you said that Travis said things to you up in that bathroom that made you realize that that wasn't the type of person that you wanted to marry, right? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. What things did he say to you that made you feel that way?
It was only one thing specifically. As our argument escalated and got more and more, by this point I was brushing my teeth. I'd found my toothpaste and toothbrush, and I was crying. He had found out about my date because I wrote it in my journal, regrettably, and when he repacked it, he read it. And I was incredibly detailed, but it talked about the time I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Argument, and then she wants to tell us about a journal and that sort of thing.
Judge, no.
She's just not being responsive, so objection, beyond the scope of the question, non-responsive.
Restate your question.
Sure, Jodi. What did Travis say to you that made you realize he didn't want to marry? What specifically?
He said, "Fuck you."
What else? Say anything else?
Well, he said a lot of things about John. He was calling him John Dickhead instead of John Dixon. That was his nickname for him for the last year. And after he said F you, he turned on his heels and left the bathroom.
Why'd you still decide to go to Havasupai with him?
Well, there was a lot of crying and that kind of thing. Dan came in the bathroom. I didn't realize he was in there. I was blowing my nose and crying and was embarrassed to be arguing in front of him. So Dan kind of was like, Dan and Desiree were kind of like the glue. They sort of said, hey, let's just calm down. Let's try to get along. Let's try to get on this trip. I wanted to go on the trip, but I contemplated just going home because it was really bad. And
Because it was really, what was that?
it was really bad between us. I was mortified. Like, we had never argued to this extent, and much less in front of somebody else. So I was very embarrassed, and I felt very ashamed. And so I stayed in the bathroom for a little while trying to calm myself down, and then I don't remember how it all came together, but eventually we all were in the garage, in the car, and we were beginning to drive off.
So the plan was to suck it up, so to speak, and go to Havasupai anyway, right?
Objection is characterized as testimony leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
And it sounds like during this trip, you two were acting like boyfriend and girlfriend again, right?
During some parts, we were kind of, well, I felt like my feelings were hurt, so I wasn't very responsive to him at that time. I wasn't ignoring him, I wasn't being rude or anything, but I just felt like an emotional chasm between us.
Okay. And this trip was when again?
It would be probably the second weekend in September.
Okay. Let's move back then towards the late part of 2007. We were talking about how the usual course of conduct was late night rendezvous, be they on your porch, be they in his bedroom, right? And that happened, you said, about 3 to 4 times a week, right?
Objection, that's the answer.
Overruled, you may answer.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And at this point in time, and now we're talking late 2007, has he been physically abusive with you? Other than the one incident you told us about?
Late 2007? There
Yeah.
was a point in October, late October, where he pushed me down on the ground in his bedroom. But I landed on my knees. I didn't fall over or anything.
You say he pushed you down on the ground in his bedroom or your bedroom?
His bedroom.
Not that there'd be any excuse for it, but what did you understand his motivation to be?
Objection, argument, Mr. Not that there would be any excuse for it.
Sustained.
What was his reason for pushing you over?
We were arguing.
Objection, hearsay. She's going to tell us what he said.
No.
Overruled.
We were arguing, and I got up to leave, and he wasn't done making his point, and he wanted to stay, and he wanted me to stay so I guess he could finish yelling at me.
You guess it was what? I didn't understand the last part.
He wanted me to, I got up to leave his bedroom, and he blocked the door and took my arms and shoved me down, and I landed on my knees, and he said, "You're not going." Okay.
Not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted in excited utterance.
Approach. Overruled.
What did Mr. Alexander say when he pushed you down?
He said no like 5 times fast, like, no. You're not going anywhere.
You weren't allowed to leave, right?
Objection,
Sustained.
Were you allowed to leave?
I didn't push the issue at that point. I tried to leave one more time and he stopped me again. And then on the 3rd time I tried to leave, he didn't stop me.
Okay. The 2nd time you tried to leave, you said he stopped you. Did he grab you and throw you down again?
No, he just put his hands on my shoulders.
Okay. Forcefully?
Yes.
Call you names?
Yes.
Like what?
That was such an awful fight. I don't remember all the names he called. I just remember one thing that really sticks out is he was insulting my family.
Again, he was asked if she was called any names. Now we're talking about the family.
Okay, well, let's ask this. How was he insulting your family? Was he calling them names?
Yes.
What was he saying about your family?
He was saying that my brother was a faggot because his name is Carl.
What else?
I told him that he was named after my grandfather, and he said, "Your grandfather must be a faggot too, then." That's just something I remember specifically that bothered me. It's not that, I wouldn't care if they're gay, but that's Travis's way of issuing a deep insult to him. That's insulting.
Did he say anything about your other family members?
Not
Did you
in,
recall?
not in that specific argument.
Okay. Now, this specific argument where he grabs you, throws you down, restrains you a second time when you get to leave, what was the thing that was so important that Travis wanted to do? Insult your family, or was there something else?
He just kept ranting and raving and yelling.
You don't remember about what?
Honestly, my brain sort of went on freeze, and I don't remember a lot of what he was saying. He was just yelling.
Okay. Why wasn't this day, the day he throws you down, the day he grabs you, the day he won't let you leave the room, the day he insults what he believes are insults to your family, why wasn't that the last day you saw Travis? Last day.
Well, it was going to be because when I was leaving the stairs, or going downstairs, he followed me all the way out to my car, just saying one mean thing after another, and then his tone changed to something very friendly, but it was like artificial friendly, and he said, I have a great idea. And he said, how about you move to Antarctica and never call me again? And I said, minus Antarctica, sure. And I was getting into the car, and after my leg got into the car, he slammed the door hard, and I started to drive away. So I thought we were not going to talk at that point. It was a very low point for me. Throughout the fall, I had been feeling suicidal, so I thought that was kind of the point where I decided I wanted to go through with that. So I called my friend Matt because he had guns, and I was going to ask him if I could borrow one because I wanted to kill myself. And he could tell, I don't know, he called a suicide hotline and had me call them, and he called my dad or my parents. And as I was on the phone with Matt, Travis began calling again as I was driving back home. And I wanted to answer because Travis always apologized after he had been very mean, and I thought maybe this is his apology. But sometimes took a while to calm down, so it could just be more of the same, of his anger. So I hung up anyway with Matt, and I answered the phone, and Travis was very sweet and very calm, and he was telling me to come back, and that he was too harsh on me, and he felt bad, and I needed to help him make his bed. I had been there doing laundry and cleaning the house when that fight started, so I hadn't finished making the bed, and all the sheets were out of the dryer.
So he wanted you to get back to your duties as a maid, right?
Judge, I'm reading, she just said that.
Is that right?
The implication was more, come help me make my bed so we can make up.
Make up meaning have sex?
Yes.
Did he request this French maid outfit again?
No.
So he makes this call, you begin to feel better. You go back over to his house?
Yes, I'm telling him no, but at the same time I'm turning around in the turnabout that's in my neighborhood.
What's that?
I'm saying no at the same time that I'm actually doing it anyway. I'm going through the turnabout on the way to my house, but instead I go all the way through it and turn around.
Why'd you turn around, Jodi?
He was being the nice person that I was, I guess, craving. Like, I had felt like a writhing ant under a magnifying glass for the last 3 hours. It was a long fight, and now he had relented, and he was being nice, and he was implying that his feelings would be hurt if I didn't come over. He was saying it very sweet, almost baby talk, but not quite. And so I came back to his house.
Did you have a sexual interaction with him after you came back to his house to make up?
Yes, we made the bed, and then, yes.
And then yes, what?
We had anal sex that night, but it was kind of loving. I mean, he said, I love you, and he whispered those things in my ear while he was doing that, and, you know.
want to ask, there was an incident talked about earlier where you walked into Travis's house and Lisa Andrews was there. Do you remember hearing about that during this
Yes.
trial? Was that around this same time period when all these things were going on?
Yes, it was right before or after we were in New Mexico.
Okay. So you get back from this trip in New Mexico, Exhibit 431. You're acting as a happy couple in New Mexico. How is it that you came to Travis's house the evening that Lisa Andrews saw you there?
Well, this might have been before New Mexico, but it was all around the same time. I had been hired at P.F. Chang's in the summer, and his roommate, John Hepworth, was always talking about how much he liked the honey chicken on their menu. It was his favorite dish. And so one night, it was a Monday night, which would be family home evening in the church. I worked, though. For short, it's called FHE. And I got off work early because it was Monday night and it was slow. And there was an extra honey chicken that was getting thrown away, so the chef said I could have it. So it was still fresh. It was in a to-go container. I put it into a to-go container. And I had taken food home before, and I usually offered to split it with my roommates. They never really wanted it. It was still early, so I knew, or I assumed, Travis was at church, and so I wasn't going to call him. But I called John, because he lives close by, and I said, "Do you want half of this honey chicken?" And he said yes, because he liked it. And so I was going to go over there, split it with him, and then go back home. Because if you put it in the fridge, it gets real soggy. It's breaded and glazed. And so I headed over. Well, he said Travis wasn't home. I asked him, I said, "Is Travis home yet?" He said no. So I started driving over to his house, and I pulled into the driveway in the same place where I always go. And I always came and went in his house without knocking. It was just something I did, and a lot of friends always did. And so I walked into the house with the container of honey chicken in my hands, and I'm walking down. It's kind of a walkway with tile. There's a living room here, and as I was coming toward the kitchen, which is just beyond that, there's a wall just beyond that. I was going to round the kitchen to get a plate for John. John was on the couch over here watching TV, and I came around the kitchen, and Travis was standing there with another girl. I didn't see who the girl was because I just saw hair, and he was standing in front of her. So I was mortified. I was like, oh my gosh. So I immediately turned and walked right back out, straight out the front door. And I got in my car and I left. And I was really embarrassed because I thought he wasn't home. And I started driving. I drove west down Elliott, and then I turned north on Signal Butte. And right as I turned north on Signal Butte, there was a car that came right up behind me with their high beams on, and they were right up on the tail end of my car.
And who was in that car?
Well, I didn't know at first. I thought it was somebody that had to go somewhere fast. So I was coming up on an LDS chapel that was on the left side of the street, and then across from the street from that was a turnout. So I assumed I'm just going to drive a few more yards and then pull over in this turnout. But this car pulled over the double yellow line and sped up, and so I thought, wow, they're really in a hurry. And then pulled in front of me and braked really hard, and I almost hit the car. And then that's when my headlights hit the paint, and I could see it was purple, and it was BMW. It was Travis's car. So he pulled then into the turnabout, and I assumed he wanted me to pull over because of that, so I pulled in behind him.
Okay. Did he offer explanation for what you had just walked in on?
After I asked, yeah.
During that discussion, did he admit to you that he was dating Lisa Andrews?
No, he didn't say who it was. I didn't see who it was. He just said a girl from his ward was there, and she wanted to see his house, and he was just giving her a tour.
Did he invite you back to the home?
Not at that point, but he gave me a hug, and he squeezed my butt and said, "You're coming over later tonight, right?" Kind of like that.
And what did that mean to you? What were you coming over there later that evening for?
To hang out, sex, pretty much.
After he was done with this date with Lisa Anders, you were to come over to have sex with him. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah.
Now, late 2007, you talk about how this relationship is going on and on and on. Are you still living in Mesa in early 2008?
Yes.
Are you having sexual intercourse with Mr. Alexander in 2008, early 2008?
Yes. Well, yes, not vaginal
Okay.
so much.
Not vaginal intercourse.
No.
Was that, you'd had it before, was there a reason you weren't having it at that time?
Yes. After, well, the first time I was asleep, the second time was in August 2007. That was consensual. And I knew we had gone all the way, so obviously that was pretty black and white that was not okay. So I confided in Rachel. I didn't want to tell her that we went all the way, but I said I think Travis and I might have gone too far, even though I knew we'd gone too far. I wanted to get her advice. And she asked me how far we'd gone, so I thought oral sex was okay, so I threw that out there. I was like, well, we've had oral sex. And her jaw dropped almost to the floor, and she freaked out and said, you have to go to your bishop right now, and I didn't know that. And she said, Travis has to go too. You need to do it right away and get right back on the right track and go tell him right now and wear your seatbelt. You know, the implication being you don't want to get in a car accident and die before you repent. It was that serious to her. And so I didn't know that. So I got in the car and called Travis and went over there and tried.
So to make a long story short here, you didn't want to have vaginal sex because of the vow of chastity or the law of chastity, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did anything happen in January of 2008 that changed your relationship with Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
What happened?
Objection, if we could have the foundation, if we could have the date and the time.
I'm asking what happened in January 2008. She can explain.
Council approach. You may continue.
Ms. Arias, this event that happened in January 2008, before we go into the particulars of it, do you remember where it occurred?
Yes.
Where?
In his bedroom.
Do you remember the date that it occurred?
It was on a Monday, and it was late January 2008. I think it was around the 21st.
Okay. What did you see on the 21st or late January of 2008? Or I should say this. What happened on the 21st of January 2008 that changed the course of your relationship with Travis?
Objection, lack of foundation, if we could have a time, morning, noon, afternoon.
She can explain the story, Judge.
All right, overruled.
I got off work. I was working at Mimi's Cafe at that point in Mesa. I got off work and came over to his house and helped him. He was loading boxes into the attic. He was just rearranging stuff, he said. So I was helping him. I was just handing them up to him. And we were hanging out for a while. He disappeared in the attic for a minute, so I was waiting for him. And then he kind of popped out and said boo and scared me and laughed about that. And then he came down the ladder and he handed me a little porcelain, it was a white porcelain angel that he had. And he handed it to me and called me an angel and gave it to me, and I thought that was sweet. And so I went and put it next to my purse, which was on the dresser in his bedroom. And we hung out a little bit longer downstairs in his office, and then I was leaving. So I ran upstairs, got my purse, shut the bedroom door after I'd already said goodbye to him, and I left. And then as I was driving back home, I realized I left the porcelain angel there. And Travis I knew he would, just knowing him, he would call me and make me feel guilty about it, or in a joking way, but in a way that I wouldn't live it down for a while.
So what did you do?
So I thought of getting it later, but because of that pattern, I turned around to go get it. And I called him real quick on his cell phone, he didn't answer. Called him real quick on his house phone, he didn't answer. I hadn't been gone 10 minutes, so I didn't think it was a big deal. I just went back there, I walked in and I ran upstairs and I went into his bedroom to grab it.
And what did you see when you got there?
I walked in and Travis was on the bed masturbating, and I got really embarrassed. Even though we'd been intimate like more times than I could count, it was just kind of awkward walking in on him like that. And I was headed toward the dresser, but then I stopped and I was trying to think of something funny or witty to say, like, do you still need my help or something? And he started grabbing at something on the bed, and I realized they were papers. And as he was grabbing the papers, one kind of went sailing off the bed, and it fell in that chaotic pattern that paper falls, and it landed face up near my feet, and it was a photograph.
What was in the photograph? What was the photograph of?
It was a picture of a little boy.
Could you guess how old first the little boy was?
5-ish, 5, 6. I'm not a good judge of age.
Did you recognize the little boy?
No.
Was the little boy dressed?
He was dressed in underwear, like briefs.
After you saw this, what did you do next?
I was frozen there for a minute. Well, maybe not a whole minute, but I didn't know how to react. It kind of seemed like one of those dreams where something is really off, but you just can't figure it out. And so I left the angel there on the dresser, and I turned bolt, and he called my name, and I just ran. I didn't stay, and I got in my car and started driving home again. Sorry.
Did you say he called you a name or he called your name?
He called my name.
Okay.
He said, wait. I called my name.
So I'm sorry, you were driving away from his home. How did you feel about what you saw?
I felt nauseated. I drove all the way home, and I was trying to drive fast enough to get to, I trying not to pull over to throw up. I got home, and I was hitting the garage door opener about half a block away so that it would be open, and I pulled right into the garage and ran inside and threw up in the bathroom.
Did you speak? Did Travis make further attempts to call you after you saw what you saw?
Yes.
How soon?
After I cleaned myself up, I went back out to my car to get my purse and my phone, and I saw that there were some missed calls from him. like 4, maybe 3 or 4.
Was this, why wasn't this moment in time, why wasn't this the end of your relationship with him?
Well, I wasn't even thinking anything along those lines at that time. I was confused and I was crying and I didn't really know what to make of all that. So I went for a drive. Before, when I didn't answer the phone, and when he called repeatedly, he would come over to the house because I didn't live far. And I didn't want to be at the house when he came over. I wasn't sure how to talk to him or what to say. So I left and I drove around for a while in Mesa, and then I ended up at the Temple Visitor Center, and I hung out in there for a little while. And I just was collecting my thoughts and not really meditating, but just trying to figure out what to do next and how to handle that.
Did you get, or did you come to a decision as far as what to do next?
Well, I wanted to, couldn't imagine like never talking to him again.
Why not?
That would just be, if we never spoke again after that point, I would feel unsettled, and I don't know. I wanted to let him explain at least. I went out and checked my phone again. My phone was turned off in the visitor center. So I went out and checked my voicemail, and there was that frantic voicemail from him finally, and there were more missed calls. And he said, just come over and talk to me, and that kind of thing. And so there was something...
Well, again, Jodi, let me address the question. And perhaps it's difficult, but why would it be, you just, from what you told us, you saw him masturbating to the image of a child. Why would it have been a problem for you? Why could you imagine not having any more contact with him after that point in time?
When I was thinking in the temple, I've heard in the past that usually people who have problems like that were hurt when they were children, and I kept thinking, what if he was hurt when he was a kid? And it made me angry to think of him as a kid and somebody violating him, and just really made me mad. And so I tried to mitigate it in my head in that way, and I wanted to talk to him and find out what was wrong with, what was going on with him. So...
Did you return his phone calls, or what happened next?
I called him back finally after a while, and we agreed to meet up. We were going to swap cars for a family home evening, and
What, you were going to swap cars for family home evening, right?
Yes.
So what you told us?
Yes,
So he could have your car, or you could have his?
both. At the time I was driving his car, but he didn't want to drive my car to church with people. He wanted to take his own car.
Okay. So he was the one going to family home evening, right?
Yes.
Okay. Same day he got caught masturbating to images of children, he was going to family home evening, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you return to his home, and you're going to trade cars. Do you just get your car and get out of there?
We never hooked up before family home meeting. I had a migraine and I needed to just sleep, and I don't know, I woke up later in the evening and I went over to his house later that night.
Okay. You go to his house later that night. Do you talk with him?
Yes.
Do you ask him about what you saw?
I didn't really have to ask him. I just was silent and let him do the talking mostly.
What did he say?
Objection, hearsay.
Are we approached, Judge?
You may.
conversation you were having or had with Mr. Alexander after you viewed his masturbating to an image of a young child. What was the subject matter of the conversation?
Mostly about, he was explaining to me.
Without telling us what he said, what was he explaining to you?
Objection, hearsay, because if she's explaining, then she's telling us what he said. She can talk about what the subject matter was and the effect, which is what we discussed.
Thanks.
After that conversation, did you come away with the understanding that Mr. Alexander had a sexual interest in children?
Yes.
Did you come away with the understanding that it was boys and girls, or was it just one or the other?
Objection, hearsay, never getting into the substance, but they're just prefacing it by saying, is it your understanding?
Rephrase.
Did you believe him to have an interest in young boys?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
Yes.
Did you believe him to have an interest in young girls?
I already knew he was interested in young girls, but they were like sexually mature girls, but minors.
Okay. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to finish this conversation. Did he express, or did you come away with the understanding that you could help him with this problem?
That's the impression he gave me.
And what was your understanding of how you were to help him with this problem?
He preferred sex with women.
He what?
He preferred sex with women.
Why?
Made him feel normal, more normal.
In this conversation, was there any discussion about why he wanted you to wear the boys' Spider-Man underwear?
That was the reason for it, apparently. That's what he had told me.
The reason being, if I understand you correctly, that he liked pretending that you were a young boy.
I didn't ask him what he was visualizing, but that's...
Objection, then. It's speculation.
That was your understanding of why he was doing it after the conversation, right?
Yes.
Was this the last time you ever spoke with Travis Alexander?
No.
Did you leave right away after this discussion?
No.
Did you submit to a sexual interaction with Mr. Alexander after this discussion?
Yes.
And what sort of interaction was that?
It was sex. It was anal sex.
Why, Jodi, were you willing to submit yourself to sexual interaction with Mr. Alexander, having seen and having heard everything you saw and heard that day?
It's hard to describe because it's very embarrassing, but he seemed very ashamed with himself, and like he didn't want to be that way. It was something he struggled with, and that's not who he wanted to be. It's not who he wanted to be in the future, and he was trying to deal with it. And when he had sex with women, he felt like a normal heterosexual man, and that's what he wanted to be, and that's what he said he was, and that's what I believed him to be. And so when he had sex with women, he felt more normal, and it was preferable to his other deviant urges, I guess you could say.
So were you doing this to help him?
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, I still loved him.
Did you ever do anything else to try to help him?
Yes.
What was that?
Before I moved back to California, I gave him a pamphlet that I found. There was a stack of them that I found in a mall. And I picked up a few of them because it was about mental health services. I don't remember what the name of it was. It had an 800 number, and it also had a 602 number. And might have had other phone numbers and a website. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it looked like they were services that were complimentary, or maybe not free, but cheap or affordable or something to that effect. I thought maybe he could just talk to some people. I thought it was confidential, and somebody he could talk to that would be able to counsel him, or that had a degree in psychology or some kind of certification in mental health counseling.
Okay. So was this in January 2008 that you found this brochure?
No, it was closer to, it was somewhere in mid to late March. It was before I moved.
Okay. How did he react when you gave him this brochure or pamphlet?
He was upset. It led to an argument. We argued about several subjects that day.
When you say argument, was this verbal or was this physical?
It started off verbal, and then it became physical.
Now, you mentioned him grabbing your wrists at conference. And now we're talking about this incident in March of 2008. Had he been physically abusive with you before March of 2008?
This incident was in April, and yes, he was physically abusive before that.
Okay. Let's talk about that then. This, after he grabbed you at the convention, when was the next time that he was physical with you?
It would have been that argument the night that I got up to leave twice, or 3 times ultimately.
When he wouldn't let you leave the room, when he threw you down?
He pushed me down.
Okay.